how this speech came about today. To be fair, Open Britain, Tim Farron, the Lib Dem leader, others have been saying exactly this sort of thing for the last 6 months, but it says something about the power that Tony Blair still enjoys, like him or loathe him, that this speech has got so much coverage today. But as you say, he's very critical of the Prime Minister here. Theresa May's about to welcome the French Prime Minister Bernard Cazeneuve shortly for talks. Of course, Brexit will be high among them, but you don't get any sense here in Downing Street that she's prepared to change her mind. We are coming out of the single market and she has promised to deliver the will of the British people.
Chris Shipp, thank you. President Trump has been dealt another setback after the man he wanted as his national security advisor turned down the job. Vice Admiral Robert Harwood says his refusal was purely for personal reasons, but his decision comes after yesterday's dramatic press conference by the president in which he denied the White House was in crisis and launched a scathing attack on the press. Geraint Vincent has the latest.
It's our top story. There's some fresh turmoil at the White House overnight.
I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. There's zero chaos.
The morning after the most jaw-dropping presidential press conference anyone can remember, and America's breakfast shows are still working out what to make of it. For an hour and a quarter, Mr. Trump took questions from journalists, repeatedly accusing them of lying while boasting of the achievements of his government.
Now, that claim, we can tell you,
the accuracy of some of his statements is being widely questioned this morning. But he was right about one thing.
Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people.
One of the things that's deepening the sense of an administration in chaos is a big personnel problem. One of the most important posts in the White House, the National Security Advisor, remains unfilled after a retired Navy SEAL, Vice Admiral Robert Harwood, turned down the president's job offer citing personal issues. There's a vacancy because the previous incumbent, General Michael Flynn, was forced to resign over contacts he's had with the Russian government about lifting sanctions on Russia. President Trump's dismissal of media questions about those contacts has meant that even among his biggest cheerleaders, like the Fox News network, there's dismay at his approach.
It's crazy what we're watching every day. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. He keeps repeating ridiculous throwaway lines that are not true at all and sort of avoiding this issue of Russia as if we're some kind of fools for asking the question. Really?
The president this morning was unperturbed. A tweet saying thank you for all the nice statements about his performance yesterday and enjoying the praise from a radio talk show host.
The press has gotten to the point where they need a watchdog, and it turns out that Trump is the watchdog.
In President Trump's intensifying confrontation with America's media, commentators and journalists are now lining up to point out how he is getting it wrong. His message, meanwhile, is still, I'm getting it all just right. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
It certainly was an extraordinary press conference delivered by President Trump last night. But how do his claims compare with the facts? Well, you can find out on our website, itv.com/news. Cuts to health and social care could be linked to tens of thousands of excess deaths, according to new research. In 2015, there was an unprecedented rise in mortality in England and Wales, with a particularly large spike seen in January. But the research has been met with some criticism, as Chris Cunningham reports.
Delays, queues and increased waiting times. January 2015 and the NHS was under severe pressure. In England and Wales, it was also a month with an incredibly high amount of deaths, almost 10,500 more than in previous years. Authors of a new report believe they may have found the reasons behind such a spike. After their research dismissed potential factors such as cold weather and flu, they turned their attention to the impact of cuts on the health system.
We've excluded all of the other possibilities, and while we are very cautious about attributing any particular findings to the cuts, it certainly does tend to point to that.
The authors say problems were exacerbated by £16.7 billion of cuts to the welfare budget and a 17% decrease in spending for older people since 2009. This despite the number of people aged 85 and over having risen by almost 9%. It's a view that's heavily disputed by Jeremy Hunt's Department for Health, who have called the report biased, saying that blaming an increase in deaths on cuts to NHS budgets is impossible. All this will be of little comfort, though, to Sharon. Her father died after falling on his way to the toilets at his local hospital. He was unattended at the time, despite numerous calls for assistance.
You know, he was 86 and he still insisted that he wanted to cook Sunday dinner for us still. You know, that's the kind of man that he was. You know, and we've lost all that because of the hospital saying that they're short-staffed.
Conclusions of the report may be disputed. The pain felt by families who needlessly lost their loved ones is clear for all to see. Chris Cunningham, ITV News.
Trade organisations and small business owners are calling on the government not to introduce planned changes in business rates. They're due to be introduced in April, and the Treasury says they're necessary to bring rates in line with property prices. But groups like the Federation of Small Business says it'll lead to job losses and business bankruptcies. Well, our correspondent Suzanne Verdi is at one business that says it's likely to be hit by the changes, and Suzanne is there now. Can you just talk us through what is happening?
Well, I'm outside Dunn's Family Bakery on a very busy high street where there are lots of small businesses all concerned about this proposed rise in business rates. They say they may have to lay people off or even close. And business leaders say it's unfair because proportionally businesses may end up paying more rates than online giants do for vast warehouses. Come inside, let me introduce you to Christopher Freeman. Now, Christopher, your family has been baking here for the last 70 years, haven't they?
That's right,
so
yes.
It's an important business for this area. How will you be affected by this proposed rate rise?
The rate rise will see our business rates rise by £6,000 a year, so it's £110 a week. So the main effect I see that having on us is reducing our ability to carry on reinvesting in the business and in the future of the shop here in Crouch End.
Some businesses are saying they face closure. Are you in that position?
No, that certainly won't be the effect of us. This is a well-established and firm business, but I do know of lots of people that are concerned about that many shops may close because it will just be one step too far.
And that's not good for the environment, I suppose, for your business to work in either, is it?
No.
What do you want the government to do?
I think in this time of uncertainty and post-Brexit and the huge increases that we're seeing come through in raw material costs, to hold off for the time being, to allow a period of stability so businesses know what the future is going to hold for them.
Christopher, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I must just say, though, that the government say that talking about business closing is just scaremongering. In fact, they say 3/4 of businesses will actually see no change at all to their business rates, and some may actually see a reduction as well. But if you do the maths, you realise that that means a quarter will be affected. Just to say as well, the government is also refuting claims that they'll make £1 billion out of these proposed changes.
Suzanne, thank you. Still to come, Arsene Wenger hints at his own future. Will he still be Arsenal's manager next season? And
Dear Google boss, my name is Chloe.
the 7-year-old girl who asked Google for a job and got a response right from the top. The new leader of UKIP was forced onto the defensive today in his first party conference speech since taking over. Paul Nuttall, who's standing to be the MP for Stoke, made headlines earlier this week after he was forced to admit he hadn't lost any close friends in the Hillsborough disaster, despite claims on his website that he had. Our political correspondent Paul Brand is in Bolton, where today's conference is taking place. What did he have to say?
Well, Ranveer, Paul Nuttall was hoping the big excitement today would be over a new national UKIP policy to scrap VAT on fish and chips, but instead, inevitably, the excitement has been over something else a little bit fishy this week, namely those claims on his website that he lost a close personal friend or close personal friends in the Hillsborough disaster, claims that he's admitted weren't true and blamed on a mistake by a press officer. Today, in his big speech here, his first speech to conference as party leader, he apologised again for that mistake, but said what he wouldn't apologise for was a smear campaign, as he called it, by rival parties.
Firstly, I take the blame for the fact that I failed to check what was put up on my website in my name. That is my fault, and I apologise. But I do not apologise for what is a coordinated, cruel and almost evil smear campaign that has been directed towards me.
Well, that is pretty much all that Paul Nuttall would say about the Hillsborough confusion today. He's refused to do any interviews. I did manage to throw a few questions to him as he left the stage, but all he would tell me is that he was definitely at least at the Hillsborough disaster. And so far, he does seem to have the support of his party. He had a standing ovation in his speech. His predecessor, Nigel Farage, has certainly been very supportive of him today. So I think there's a good chance that Paul Nuttall is going to ride this one out, and that the focus here this afternoon is probably going to switch back to policy rather than personalities.
Paul Brand, thank you. Consumer goods giant Unilever has rebuffed a proposed merger with the global food firm Kraft Heinz. The company behind Heinz tomato ketchup and Philadelphia cheese said it had made a comprehensive proposal about combining the two companies, but Unilever turned the offer down. A group of British tourists in Norway have been taken to hospital after a boating accident. 11 people ended up in the water when a sightseeing boat hit a fountain near the town of Harstad. And in the past few minutes, the death has been announced of the children's author Dick Brunner. He was best known as the creator of Miffy books when he was 89 at his death. Now in sport, Arsene Wenger is England's longest-serving football manager, but today he admitted he might not be in charge at Arsenal next season. The Frenchman has been at the helm for more than 20 years, but he's come under pressure after a disappointing season which saw them lose 5-1 against Bayern Munich in the Champions League on Wednesday. Well, our sports editor Steve Scott is at Arsenal's stadium. Steve, are we looking at the end of an era here?
Well, Ranveer, all this increased attention on Arsene Wenger is, as you say, because of that 5-1 defeat to Bayern Munich, a capitulation, really. Those that know Arsene Wenger well said they'd never seen him so deflated, so dejected after a defeat. But to a certain extent, we are where we were. There is a 2-year contract sitting on the table ready for him to sign. He said today he will either sign it or not this month or maybe next month. What is new today, though, is he revealed that whatever happens here, he won't be retiring.
No matter what happens, I will manage next season. Is it here or somewhere else? You know, that's absolutely for sure. But on a night like that, of course, I hate defeat and I hate to lose games, and I want to do extremely well for this club.
Well, the bookies still have him as a firm favourite to start next season as Arsenal manager. Whether he does or whether he doesn't, his legacy is assured, not just at Arsenal, where he's delivered a dozen or so trophies and constant Champions League football, but in the Premier League too, where he's introduced a whole new approach to preparation for players and their fitness. And for those Arsenal fans who think that change will bring instant success, they could do well to reflect on one of their fiercest rivals a couple of years ago, Manchester United, when they lost their longest-serving manager, Sir Alex Ferguson. As so often in sport, be careful what you wish for.
Indeed, thanks, Steve Scott. And finally, Chloe Bridgewater is a girl with real ambition. While some children dream of being an astronaut, a vet or a train driver, this 7-year-old from Hereford has her sights set on a career with Google. And her efforts have had a sensational effect. The story began when Chloe wrote a letter to the chief executive of the internet company.
Dear Google boss, my name is Chloe and when I am bigger, I would like a job with Google. My dad said I can sit on beanbags and go down slides and ride go-karts in a job in Google. I am 7 years old and my teacher tells my mum and dad I am very good in class. My dad told me to give you an application to get a job in Google. I don't really know what one of them is, but he said a letter will do for now. Thank you for reading my letter. I have only ever sent one other, and that was to Father Christmas. Goodbye.
Oh, what a great letter, and you had a great response, and I can say that Chloe and Dad Andy are here. Hello to both of you. So, you clever girl. What were you thinking when you wrote that? Did you think you'd get a reply?
No.
Not at all. But what attracted you? Why do you think you want to work for a big internet company when you were a big girl? The offices looked quite fun, didn't they? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Dad, so you were just having a general chat, were you, about your job?
Yeah.
And what was that conversation? How did it end up?
She just asked me about my job, and I'm a sales manager for a refrigeration company, which isn't very exciting to a 7-year-old girl. So she said, "Oh, Dad, where would you like to work?" And I said, "Google would be pretty cool, Chloe." So I showed her a bit more of Google. I Googled Google.
Yeah.
Showed her the images of the ball pits, the slides, etc. And she wanted to work there.
So you wrote this letter, and then what happened?
We wrote it on the Monday, sent it off to America, and 4 days later, on the Thursday, we received the reply from the main man himself.
From the CEO of the whole of Google. What did he say in this letter?
That for Chloe to carry on with her schoolwork, to carry on being good at school, to fulfil her dreams, carry on with her ambitions, and hopefully one day she can work for him. Smiley face.
Yeah, and what do you think why do you think it's got so much attention?
It's nice to see that someone in such a massive company who's very busy can take time out to write a letter to a 7-year-old little girl all the way across, the pond.
Yeah, and it also shows what a good conversation between parents and children can achieve, which is a sense of ambition and aiming really high, I guess. Is that what you were trying to do with her?
Yes and no. I mean, first and foremost, she's a kid and she needs to be a kid and do 7-year-old things that kids do. But if she wants to carry on doing things like this, then we'll encourage her all the way.
And you're a bit shy, aren't you? But who else have you written letters to like this? To anyone else before?
The Queen and Santa.
The Queen and Santa. And did they both reply to you?
Yes.
My goodness me. I don't know who else is on your list. Have you got anybody else amazing you could write to next?
No, I'm not sure.
You're not sure? Well, I think you'll probably get a reply whoever you write to now. You're a famous little girl. Well, good luck with everything and keep working hard like that very important man at Google told you to. Good girl. And well done you. Great, great skills to, get her to write this letter. Thank you. All right. That's it from us. We're back at 6:30. See you then.